Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changing the Game. I'm Wilson Casado, and today I have with me Greg Riebe. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wilson. Pleasure to be here.
Greg is a legend in the angel invest scene here in Western Australia. So very hard a person that that is in the angel investing scene and doesn't know Greg. So Greg, extensive experience in corporate SME and startup has helped him hone a unique set of skills that recognize where enabling technologies combined with highly scalable business models can result in high performance operating business. With over 20 years of experience in most facets of the emerging technology sector, Greg ran what was the first technology incubator in Perth, managed a fund investing in technology startups, has been a co-founder of a number of technology businesses, and more recently, as an advisor to founders on how to become investment ready, how to get scale, create and capture value, and how to position their ventures to harness returns for shareholders, investors, and stakeholders. Greg's exposure to filtering, assessing, and structuring numerous individual innovative ventures for investment and or acquisition or divestment has helped him better appreciate the perspectives in the sourcing of funds from capital providers, fund investors, co-investors, and business owners. In 2020, Greg was recognized as the Australian Angel Investor of the Year and was awarded the 2020 WA Percy Entrepreneurship Award. So I do know as well, Greg, that as recent as yesterday, you became a live member of the Perth Angels. So congratulations.
Very proud of
that. Greg, that's an impressive bio. So, however, I normally start this conversation asking the guests to talk about themselves and a bit beyond what is in the bio. So who is Greg?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question that you do write those sort of things to just try and sort of, elucidate or, expand on what you think your skills and strengths are. But I would actually sit there and say beyond that, my passion is really just getting out and helping people. I get a real bang out of working with people, seeing that glint in their eye, being able to sort of just, that aha moment, this is what I can do to create and capture value. And so that, to me, it's that interaction with people. That's why I love the Perth Angels. That's why I love entrepreneurship. I love those mentoring type things because, working with people is really where there's enjoyment. And seeing them achieve helps me achieve.
Very nice. So, but where you started, Greg? Did you go to university? What did you study? What did you study?
Yeah, I this is going back one too many decades, Wilson, but I had these sort of long-term plans of becoming a bean counter. And then all of a sudden I heard about computers. So my degree was actually in commercial computing. I started off as a geek, a propeller head, as a software engineer, got very technical into computing, and started off with BHP and that sort of stuff. And then just everything moved on from there. And it's been quite an interesting journey from one step to the other, where it's brought me to where I am today.
So that's very interesting. That's something that they didn't know about you. So good.
Yeah. No, I'm a propeller head. I'm the geek, mate.
Very good. So, but look, for starting the career in that sort of technology area in computing and going through large companies and etc. So, at certain point, so you became an investor. So, is that how was that journey? What happened there?
Yeah, it was really interesting. And it's sort of when you put the journey together. I mean, I went through that sort of technology side of things, and as I said, it was very technical in that. I then actually got into management, got actually involved in consulting through Arthur Young, Ernst & Young at one point in time, and I think a lot of that started to give me those first sort of exposures into innovation. I then headed up IT and innovation with Jai Insurance during the 90s, and that was very much innovation, commercialization. But it was the early parts of 2000 where after I left SGIO, I managed to join a small not-for-profit, and we syndicated with a few other people, and we're able to secure a license from the federal government to actually run an investment fund to invest in IT startups. And so that was actually where we had that first incubator here in Perth, where we in a sense, as I often say to people, it was the blind leading the blind, talking to the tone deaf, because incubators and accelerators were just new terms at that point in time. And so you might have called us an accelerator because we provided capital. You might call us an incubator because we actually tried to actually nurture it. So, but it was at that stage there where I actually was running an investment fund where we're actually investing in technology startups, sometimes at the seed, maybe at the development stage. And that's what started it all 20 odd years ago.
That's extremely interesting because I caught myself in some conversations being of that opinion that only 10 years ago, so I was looking around in Perth and it was pretty hard to find those, business incubators or accelerators or university hubs that talk about innovation. So in only 10 years ago, so I found it hard. So I started to thinking that I was just a bit blind and looking at the same place, because you're talking about 20, 25 years ago. So, I have that pioneer group already making some noise there, which is good.
It was a great program. It really was, actually. And we needed to learn a lot because, these were concepts or even things that just all across Australia that were brand new.
Very nice. So, look, maybe on that sort of, you mentioned about the one thing about investing these days that the scene is completely different, right? So many more people now have access to be able to become an investor in startups and etc. So we still have that sort of, I think is like, I don't know if it's a myth, so we can explore this in this conversation, but people still think, oh, I don't have money to invest on these. So this is for rich people and etc. So how is your take on that? Were you rich when you started investing?
No. And, I actually think any level of investment, and sometimes actually, a colleague of mine uses a nice term, is that wealth becomes a proxy for knowledge. And it's not necessarily the case. It's knowledge that is actually going to help you actually, identify, filter, select, structure, and manage a sort of an investment if you want to come at the early stage. And so it comes down to where's your appetite, what's your risk reward profile, what do you like doing? And if you've got a lower one, and you like other people to look after it, well, that's where managed funds and the stock exchange are a great way of doing it. If you've got a penchant to actually look at emerging tech at an earlier stage, this is where angel investing really sort of comes to the fore. And so I think it's actually understanding that investment process, and it is part of that education bit, to let people know that there is actually, there's some techniques, there's some structures, there's places to collaborate with that actually can help you understand how to actually do it in a risk mitigated way. It's always risky, but in a risk managed way, and in fact actually collaborate with others to actually recognise and address that issue of you being time poor, as also not being the sort of the deep pockets. Yep. So how do you use a group to actually syndicate your time, your knowledge, and your money to actually get enough critical mass that can actually help an early stage venture to not only sort of start, but actually take off and succeed.
No, that's pretty nice. So I'm listening to you saying, and I'm just realizing that while the two of us are quite familiar with the angel investing scene and terms and etc., it might be that some people that will watch us or listen to us, so you're not that familiar. So what is your take, Greg, about what is angel investor?
Yeah, so I think I think the definition of an angel investor is someone that actually applies their time and their own money and their knowledge to actually get involved or participate in a venture. Typically, it's not at the R&D stage, because in a way that's one way of managing risk. There's a lot of good R&D, but it's not until you get it to that you've actually got some validation that it's worthy of and a way to pursue it. But it's probably what I call the development stage. Some people use startup, some people use pre-seed, pre-A series. It's a different sort of terms, and that's why I think education is good, because these terms aren't complex; they're just different, and everyone can actually understand the terms. That's why we run our education things at the Angels, because we want people just to understand the terms. And so I think they tend to focus in at that development stage where there's been some proof of concept, may not actually into the market yet. They're definitely not profit. They may not even be revenue. But we can actually see an opportunity. We can see that what needs to make that opportunity work, and we can see that we, with our network, can actually help make that work. And if we think there's a big opportunity that we can help make work, we syndicate it together, and classically that's called angel investing. And there's a whole range of different other definitions of angels. But it's your time, your money, your knowledge, your connections to actually help influence the creation and capturing of value.
Very interesting. So is that sort of investment that you don't come only with the money, right? So you bring an additional capabilities to it.
Absolutely, and I think that's so. For example, if and again, these are bona fide ways of doing it. I can put my money into a managed fund. I can put my money into the stock exchange, but classically, it's a financial investment. I can't influence that venture in any shape, form at all. With angel investing, I can actually use my knowledge, my connections, not necessarily all your time, a little bit of time, to actually influence the creation of value. And so, it is more than just money, a lot more than money. And it's a way of you actually being able to influence the accretion of value in your money.
Very interesting. Greg, you've been on this journey for a while, so you might have lots of stories about startups and founders and etc. So can you think of one very nice story that's worth sharing? So a successful story?
Yeah, there's probably there's a few of those which are around. And it's interesting how things actually go on a bit of a roller coaster. One venture, couple of ventures that I'm still involved with today, by the way. We took a position early on where those ventures have actually grown quite well. And the reason they've grown quite well is actually there's a good team. There's a good people. They understand what's actually going on. And so to me, the success stories that you see out of there always comes down to people. In the angel group, we often talk about, do we back the jockey or do we back the horse? In that early stage, we back the jockey because they know how to ride a horse. And they may not know how to run a race fully at the moment, but that's the knowledge that we can actually help plug those gaps for them. And so, they're the type of things where I've found that one, they're actually, I'm getting the value that I want out of that level of input. But at the same time, I'm getting that enjoyment out of that in doing that. But like I say, it's always a roller coaster because things do happen. But coming out of those sort of dips, it's always people that actually have the resilience to do that.
So, and you're saying about those sort of the roller coasters, the up and downs and etc. So where the journey of those ventures and founders not an easy one, and being a optimistic entrepreneur. So I'm always looking at that sort of in the bright side of it, looking at the positive and etc. someone that's listening that's saying, well, but this is really too risky and etc. There might be some ugly stories or stories of, that companies that didn't go well and companies that ceased to exist. So how is that true? There are many of those, and in those cases, how you feel about it?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think like most at that early stage, and that's why we talk about having a fairly broad portfolio of investments to actually manage that broad risk. We actually talk about actually putting lots of little bits of money out, not just one large one, because some are absolutely going to fail. And so it's taking that portfolio approach to actually manage that. Getting better at it over time. I think one of the points we were talking about, is in terms of, what's your risk tolerance? I probably am a little bit, that glass half full type guy. But I think over time, what I've found with those that have not gone well is that actually I can have an influence in terms of mitigating the ones that are not going to go well. And so I just take a structured approach, and it's getting that sort of validation step by step through that commercialization journey, where, if I can actually validate and that gives me some certainty of future value, I'll move to the next step. If I can't see any certainty of future value, well, let's stop. Type of thing. And so I think for those people that are actually sitting there going, well, it is risky. The answer is yes, it is risky. That's why you need to actually treat early stage investing in a very disciplined approach. That's what we do in the Angels. It's very disciplined. And so, we're very disciplined about how do we attract companies to look at. We're very disciplined about how we filter them. We're very disciplined in terms of what we select, and we're very disciplined in how we structure it. Yes, there's still always risk along the way, but we're actually using, in effect, best practice to actually reduce that risk and give greater chance of actually getting an upside. You still will have failures, but you've got a greater chance of having success.
Yeah, very nice. So one of the things you mentioned is about building a portfolio as opposed to investing in one or two companies here and there, and to mitigate that risk of one individual company. So so you talk about discipline as well. So discipline to select deals, discipline to be able to choose a deal where you're going to invest. So when it comes back to your own decision of investing, do you have a criteria? Do you choose industries, or do you choose any sort of particular aspect in the deals that you look at?
Yeah, I think you always do. I think another sort of, lesson I've learned over time is that people just don't invest in what they don't understand. And so what we try and do is actually help people understand, areas or new that they're not exposed, new emerging tech. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to, use your money, your time, your connections, you're probably going to tend to focus in the ones that you have a better understanding of. And so, my background is software. I've been really lucky over the last 20 years that software tends to be an enabler, and it's worked across a lot of different industries. So I'm probably, from a tech side of things, I'm probably more software technology. I'm probably a little bit more open today, whether or not that's applied in a medical area, or, a cyber area, or whatever. But I'm probably not going to jump deep into live pharma or some deep medical tech, because I probably don't have enough. I mean, I know enough people who do that, and I trust them. And so I might jump behind them, but I'd probably be more cautious about that. So I think it does influence us in terms of, where we want to stick our money. And particularly in the early times, you're building your portfolio, you're probably going to stick with what is your choice. As you become more confident in your discipline, you'll probably open that up and work with other people to help plug the gaps that you've got.
So interesting. You start mentioning that there are the familiar areas for you, and areas where you feel comfortable, that you feel you can contribute a little bit more, and somehow associate your decisions with that. But then you touch another point is, oh, but I know people that know all the stuff that I don't know, and sometimes I jump with them. So is that what the concept of syndication is? Is that why groups like angel groups and etc. exist? How that sort of collaboration and syndication play a role in these investments?
Yeah, I actually, and I think the more confident you get in that sort of early stage, those disciplines, you can now start to understand that it's all about the people. It's about the smarts. It's about the connections. And so if you can see where the opportunity is, now it's a matter of what's needed to make that work, and where are the gaps, and can we plug those gaps? Not looking at it as, oh, just because of that, it won't work. No, let's look at what will make it work if it's a real opportunity. And so syndication, I think, is a great way of addressing that, in terms of not only the scarce amount of money, aggregating that to make it properly capitalized to take off and run.
Yep.
But plugging those capability gaps, those market connection gaps, and that's working with other people, where if you're all coming in at that same sort of level, you actually are aligned in your interest, success, and hopefully your reward, return. In terms of that, so you're all getting in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, heading to the same destination. And so syndication, I think, is a great way of doing that, and it's a really good risk mitigation approach.
Very nice. So I think when you talk about syndication and collaborating with other investors and etc., so I think a trust plays a big role in it. So I believe that sort of building those relationships of trust is quite fundamental to that. So would you have a tip or a process that you follow, and how you do to build those relationships, that trust with the people around?
Yeah, look, I think trust is absolutely critical in this sort of stuff, because
you think, actually, or you think
even
not?
If you're in a sorry,
you think, or you think not?
Oh no, I think so.
Yeah,
absolutely critical. Yes, sorry. Thanks for clarifying. No, definitely trust is absolutely critical. Not only within the founder team itself. I mean, if there's not chemistry there, and that's one of the things that you'll look at when you're filtering or selecting a business. If the founding team doesn't have chemistry, time to walk away. But it's the same, I think, with the investor group as well. And I think you'll tend to sit alongside people that you've got to know, either through your own personal connections, which I love doing, or people that I have a great connection with, and I know that they have a trust in someone, which will actually bring me trust in that person as well.
Yep.
So it is back down to people very much, and so I think trust is absolutely critical, both on the investment team but also in the founding team.
Very nice.
And sorry, between those two teams. Actually between those two teams, and I think that becomes big magic, in terms of that.
Greg, so you have these, I introduced you saying that you're a legend in the angel investing, sort of saying in WA and etc. How you see, because at the end of the day, here in WA, we're famous for being an isolated capital, right? So we need to fly a few hours to get to the next capital. So how in the investment scene of these days, that play a role? So is that sort of local versus global mentality?
Yeah, I think that's changing a real lot. We were having this conversation just yesterday, actually. We go back sort of 10 years than when we actually found the Perth Angels. very much then, the dominant behavior in the angel groups is that they actually only invested in their own proximity. And in fact, actually, if I go back to the 2000s, in terms of the venture capital industry, even in Silicon Valley, a thing there is that no one would invest in anything unless that had to be within an hour and a half drive. That was a metric. Nowadays, people are investing all over the place. And I think it's because that discipline of early stage investing is quite common. It's becoming more common, sorry. And therefore, people have a trust in that you're doing the same thing that I need to have done. I think, with, virtual, just even these, virtual side of things, we're talking a lot more over these types of platforms. So I think, organisation and even the entrepreneurs themselves are now starting to think and in how they can operate globally, not just think globally. I mean, that doesn't get you anywhere thinking, but how to actually operate, act globally. I think, we've got just as much chance here. And I think we've got some natural entitlements even here and then our WA, where, we're really world class. And if we can actually play to those world class strengths, people around the world want to play with world class. And that's just part of that commercialization and investment ecosystem that we've got to build.
Very nice. Indeed, in the last 10 years, well, the change in technology that we had as well, so it drive quite a bit of the behavior of the people, isn't it? And well, in the last 2 years, even went on steroids with everything that we've been going through. Particularly in this work remotely and, diverse or not diverse, but remote team sort of thing. So that become quite a big thing. Greg, so do you still remember what was your first investment?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I was thinking that through. In fact, it was actually an investor-founder type situation. Yep. And the real interesting that was actually with a colleague of mine. It was in a fintech area, to be frank. And so we built our prototypes. We're still early stage, but as we sort of developed it further, we realised actually it needed a much bigger organisation to really get it run because of just the way the ecosystem was then.
Yep.
That wasn't bad actually, because we ended up selling the business plans, the concept, the prototypes, and we got a big return out of that.
That's a nice story.
that was probably, I was still a little bit blind, and that was probably more luck than best plans. So yeah, that was the first one back in the 90s actually.
So these days, because you create that sort of reputation as an investor, and I wonder there are few people that come to you, more in the founder side, right? So founders that are looking for investment, etc., ended up having access to you. What do you, first of all, so are you happy with that? You welcome that sort of connection with founders and encourage them to come to you? And when they come, what is that make this spark? What is that you're looking for in those initial conversations?
Yeah, look, I think actually I do get a buzz out of that. I mean, I really enjoy listening to new ideas and so on. So yeah, I welcome actually talking to to people about their ideas. I probably am focusing my time on at a particular stage of the commercialization journey than I did earlier. I think that which gives me a real buzz is that people start talking about that they've got a real world problem that they want to solve, that they know needs to be solved. And that, if it's not solved, there's really quite severe implications. And therefore, it's a real world problem, it's a deep problem, and there's a real need. That's probably my first test. If what I've got is someone just got a great idea and they can't really tell me what the problem is, well, I'll give them that advice, and I think they need to go away and work on that, because that's not generally a journey to success.
Very interesting. So they're really a really good articulation of what the problem you're trying to solve is quite key in that early stage, isn't it?
Look, I really think so. And you know, if it is and generally speaking, the reason these things come really innovative and the innovators and the entrepreneurs is because for whatever life reason or life experience or, you know, they've observed something that you and I just haven't, you know, because there's too much noise or, you know, quite frankly, when, you know, we're not deep enough in that area, we don't get ourselves exposed, but they have, and they've observed that there's a real world problem here and they've got potentially an idea on how to actually, you know, solve that. That actually, they're the really interesting ones that we sort of talk through. And for me, it's understanding how they're going to take that journey forward, how they're going to execute. If I can give some advice on that, very happy to do that. Yeah.
Very nice. So, Greg, we're actually coming to the end of our chat. So, but I still have a question that I will break that down in two, so to get your opinion on that. So, one of the things that I'm very passionate about is education, right? So, and having that sort of perspective that you have, having seen the industry change in the last 20 years. So I reckon that one I do know that you offer your wisdom doing, you know, angel investing training. So one part of the question will be that. So like, what are the key aspects that you hear that people have a different perception of what really is when you try to educate people about angel investing? The other one is, what about the founders? Do you notice? Have you noticed any difference between the background in education about being an entrepreneur that founders had 20 years ago and what is going on today? So how these schools are changing in that sense?
Yeah. Probably answering that second one first, you know, in terms of the entrepreneur side of things. Without doubt, I think in terms of the broader education area and just the level of activity and momentum, and therefore it's more in people's eyes, and particularly over the last few years, I think there's more people sitting there saying, well, maybe there's an opportunity for me in terms of being, you know, take an entrepreneurial path. And there's been a huge shift, you know, globally, Australia, WA, where, you know, the days of old where, you know, you had a job for 40 years, you know, to now the sort of the gig economy, and people are getting quite attuned to being more agile. And now people are actually thinking about how they can actually exploit a potential problem with an idea that they can take forward. And so I think that's actually grown quite a lot. And I think there's been some good entrepreneurial programs that we've had in this state in Australia that is actually helping people gain that capability and skills.
Nice.
You know, from the investor side, and I think actually structuring an answer to your question is that inevitably capital or money comes into the deal because the entrepreneurs need fuel to fuel their business, capital. And, you know, so they're the entrepreneurial side of the coin. And then there's the investor side of the coin is looking to apply their surplus cash in a way to get a better return. I think for me, where I've seen where I think there's been a bigger gap in the marketplace, and that really is quite different in WA as it is in some of the other states and around the world, where the general population doesn't really understand the full capital and finance spectrums, the various sources of capital and the various appetites, and therefore they're not sure where they fit in, and how they can fit in. And so that's one of the things we try and do, you know, through the Perth Angels is to allow them just to understand what that spectrum is, and depending upon the risk reward appetite that they've got, they can either play a little bit earlier or a little bit later. Quite frankly, for us in the Angel Group, we're quite happy for just people working out where they want to play, because what we want is increased investment capacity to actually support these entrepreneurs as they go through their various journey.
Yep.
So we want more at the early stage, and we want a lot more at the later stage. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think that to me is probably the that biggest gap is just understanding that spectrum and where there are opportunities for people to actually play and manage those risk reward profiles.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned something about that, the knowledge itself about, what are the asset classes over there that I can invest on. So we having a conversation yesterday with a financial advisor that came to one of our events. And she was sharing with us the fact that she is a financial advisor, but she herself know very little about, other than mainstream asset classes that people invest on. She is not even capable to advise otherwise because she doesn't have that knowledge. So
yeah, that's exactly my point. And I think particularly in this state, the dominant investment practices has either been at listed or property.
That's right.
What we want to do is to not stop people doing that, but maybe just allocate a smaller amount, but some interest in actually investing. And it is different at that sort of emerging private tech or emerging venture.
Fantastic, Greg. Greg has been a delight. So every time that we have these conversations, the feeling is always the same. So the feeling is that we could stay here for an hour having a chat or 2 hours. So I'm not sure if the one that's listening in the podcast would be happy with that hour plus. So we need to finish at a certain point. So Greg, again, it's a privilege. I'm very grateful for you being here with us. Thank you very much.
No, it's actually, the privilege is mine, Wilson. I think what you're doing is just absolutely sensational, because I think we've got to get out to the community, all of these, to give them insights as to what's possible. And if they can actually start to imagine that they could be part of that, maybe we're going to get some movement. And so I think this is fantastic. So kudos to you.
No, thank you. And that's the idea. So we're here for that. We're here to change the game. So help the people to understand a little bit more that, everything that they can be, and potentially use the innovation, the education and diversity as tools for that. So I'm enjoying that journey a lot. And well, that journey is only possible, with guests like you. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. This was Changing the Game with Greg Riebe.